Hey there, I'd just like to ask before the video starts, if you like what you see, please give us a click on the like and subscribe buttons. Hi everybody, I'm Karl Wells. Today, my guest is the president and publisher of Breakwater Books Limited, Newfoundland and Labrador's oldest publishing house. It's been around for, believe it or not, over 50 years now. And here to talk all things publishing is publisher Rebecca Rose. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Carol. How are you?
Good. First question. You just moved to a new location on Duckworth Street. That must be exciting. Tell us all about that.
It is, yes. We just finished settling in there about 2 weeks ago, and we've moved to 263 Duckworth Street. So our former landlords were the John Howard Society, who were very good to us at our location on Stamps Lane, but outgrew their own spaces and needed their space back. So they gave us plenty of time and notice to find a new home. Thankfully, we're very gracious about the challenges of the current marketplace for space, but we were fortunate to land where we have with some downtown building owners who really appreciate the value of what a bookstore can bring to a city and to a downtown, and certainly in our city where we really don't have a true independent bookstore, and one of the only capital cities in the country without one, in fact. So we're very fortunate with those landlords to be able to get into that space. And it's a perfect setup for us to be able to have retail in the heart of the city and now be able to expand the offerings that we have in that retail. Previously, we only stocked our own titles for the most part, and now this presents an opportunity for us to showcase the works of other local book publishers, which is what we've started with, is other Newfoundland and Labrador book publishers and carrying their stock as well. And hopefully increasing the awareness of local books and local authors in our hometown.
Yeah, and it's a great location because there's lots of foot traffic there.
Absolutely.
And of course lots of tourists in the downtown through much of the year.
We saw that the very first day. I think the majority of people that came in the first day that we opened were all visitors to the province, which was great. We were asking everyone to learn that, and most of them were visitors. It was wonderful.
Yeah, totally. Okay, let's talk a bit of the history of the company. Breakwater was started back in 1973 by your dad and several of his friends.
That's right.
Tell us the story of the genesis of the company.
So they were all teaching at Memorial in different departments and subject areas. Tom Daw, Al Pittman, Pat Byrne, and Dick Bueller, and my father. And were friends and artists themselves, of course, and really grew frustrated, I suppose, with the lack of Newfoundland and Labrador work and writers and content, and Canadian content for that matter. I mean, the majority of materials being taught at that time were British or American, and so they felt there was an opportunity there to highlight work of their friends and their peers in the community who they knew were equally talented writers and artists and illustrators and such. And so that was I think over some pints maybe in a bar, you know, the genesis of the company was formed, and that was the motivation, was really they were certain that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians were as talented as anyone else that they were teaching, and they took an opportunity to try and prove that.
I'm sure there's been lots of great ideas generated at the Ship Inn.
Yes, that's right, exactly, yeah.
So prior to 1973, where were Newfoundland and Labrador authors getting their books published?
I mean, Newfoundland and Labrador writers, some might have benefited from some of the established Canadian presses at that time, but not really. The majority would have been American or British. If you look at Margaret Dooley, for example, who's considered one of Newfoundland's most successful first writers. She was published by a British publishing house and was very well known overseas, but not so much at home. Our industry was new and not formed enough to get word back quite yet. So I think the majority of them were relying on American and British opportunities, and that's why you saw particularly a lot of American and British content.
Who were some of the first authors that Breakwater published?
Well, I mean, I think the first anthology had a really good combination of many names still known to this day. That's where you're seeing the debut of Al Pittman, of Tom Daw, of Helen Porter, Enos Watts, I believe, Mary Dalton. So the first book was an anthology, so it had samples of poems and plays and essays, so a little bit of everything, and that allowed for an opportunity for multiple Newfoundland writers who are still working to this day, are certainly well known still today, to debut their work. Kevin Major was one of the early editors on books like that. Des Walsh was one of the early editors of Breakwater. So these names are still very well known and regarded in our writing community today, thankfully.
So, yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned Mary Dalton and Enos Watts.
Yeah.
So, poetry, short stories. This was the type of stuff that Breakwater, in the beginning, was publishing. Why did they focus on those genres and not, novels, for example? Because, I mean, I don't mean any disrespect, but, a book of poems is probably not going to sell like hotcakes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. It does not. It still doesn't. Nor does drama and short stories. They are some of the more challenging genres.
You've been steadfastly publishing those books for 50 years.
Yeah.
To your credit.
Yeah. They're so important, you know. I mean, that work starts and initiates, I think, the canon of any country for its literature, Canada included. And I think it's the starting point for many writers that then transition successfully to novel writing. But it's important creative output that's overlapping too with so many other sectors in the arts and cultural community. So you're showcasing that work there, and that's important. I think that synergy across all the other arts and cultural spectrum need to be reflected in the literature and be relevant of the time. So we have to keep publishing it. It's great to rely on the old classics. They're timeless and for good reason, but it's important to continue to contribute to literature and have contemporary topics and issues of relevance there so that we continue to keep people engaged. So, it's all important. All the genres are important, but those challenging ones are easy to be overlooked by bigger, more commercial publishing houses. And so that's why independent presses, I think, like Breakwater, are so important, because we're willing and able to take more risk and work with more experimental works or more challenging works that don't immediately find commercial success, but are most certainly important to documenting who we are as society and culture and what's important to us in how we engage with literature.
So back in the early days, was there any wise man or established publisher, any mentors that your father and his partners could go to for advice in growing the company and building it?
I'm sure there probably were. I mean, insofar as what content to publish, I think they all had each other and such a rich community here of writers and folklorists and illustrators and artists and stuff. But in how to do that commercially successfully with literary works and such, they most definitely would have had to rely on industry experts that were already doing this or who were also trying to do it at the same time. So I think of people like Jim Lorimer, who is a leading publisher out of Nova Scotia and started around the same time as Breakwater did in Newfoundland and Labrador. People like that, they certainly leaned on each other and they created initiatives. They made Atlantic-wide initiatives, marketing and promotional help and support for one another. Ron Kaplan is another man out of Cape Breton who was doing the same kind of work. So there was definitely a lot of collaboration. Thankfully, the industry has been very collaborative and doing a lot of projects in partnership. I'll put your books in my province, you put mine in yours. You know,
Right.
these kind of things were happening in the early days. And then eventually you saw the establishment of the professional publishing associations that was giving them access to all of the other national publishers that were starting up in the other provinces, and any that had already existed, like the long-standing names like McCullough and Stewart and such. So there you're seeing the creation of organizations like the Literary Press Group of Canada, the Association of Canadian Publishers, and Breakwater was an active member. My father was, you know, on the boards of those organizations over the years. To do exactly that for Breakwater, to expose it to national opportunities and professional development from people who were already doing this and had some things to teach us, and were able to help elevate the company's efforts nationally and internationally. So most definitely there's a lot of mentorship and learning. Still to this day,
Yeah.
I do the same.
Now, it's not much good having a product to sell if you can't tell people about it. But
Yeah.
I'm thinking, you know, today we rely so much on social media, like Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Back then, there was none of this stuff.
None of it, yeah.
So how did they market these? How did they let people know, hey, we're here, we have this book?
Yeah, I mean, the most important influence on book sales still to this day is word of mouth, and that's what they did. But they literally took it on the road. So they were building and creating cultural showcases, and so they would get in a van, fill it up with those books that they had made, and drive across the province. And they would have a show with, you know, Rufus Ginchard playing music, and my father and Al Pittman reading poetry, and Mike Cook performing a bit of a piece from a play. They were putting together these real cultural showcase nights and touring them across the province. I mean, Breakwater had a band. The Breakwater Boys were a musical act at one point.
I'd forgotten all about the Breakwater Boys.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
And Breakwater produced the first album by Rufus Ginchard. So, like, in those early days, there was so much collaboration amongst musicians and artists and writers, and so they all worked together and went on the road and showcased that way. And so once word got out there that there were books and they were Newfoundland writers, and people would be able to see themselves and their own stories in them, they took to it. And so I think they just really relied on the old-fashioned, you know, hit the ground and spread the word, and it worked.
Yeah. Well, it sure did, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, 50 odd years later,
Yeah.
you're still around.
That's right.
I have a couple of books from the very early years of Breakwater. I have 3 plays by Michael Cook. I have Uncle Mose by Ted Russell.
That's right.
And I was looking at them before this interview, and I noticed that there's no mention of any grants from the Canada Council or the government of Newfoundland or the government of Canada. There's nothing about any kind of outside funding.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there wasn't, was there, at that time?
I don't think so. Certainly none specific to book publishing
Yeah.
or writers directly. There might have been some early federal funding available for the arts, you know, but nothing specific to this
But it's
industry.
something you always see today.
Yes, and really, I don't know that we would all be here without it to this day.
Exactly.
It's my understanding that the majority of funding specific to writing and publishing didn't come until like the 80s. And then it was in response to the fact that the government recognized the need to support the industry so that it could remain competitive with the fact that our country was already dominated by foreign published content, as are most countries. And so they recognized the need, in order to have a Canadian voice and a Canadian canon, that they would have to support it accordingly in order to have any chance of competing with the multinationals who rule the marketplace. So that's my understanding of where the funding first started federally, and then eventually provincial funding followed. So I think later in the 90s is where you see the establishment of support for publishing in this province, for example, and that was to augment whatever the federal funding couldn't do in any given province and create more opportunities for writers within any given province to have an opportunity to be published in this country.
So did your dad and his partners put their own money into the company in
Oh,
the
they
beginning?
sure did. Yeah, I mean, I'm told that
That's
my
such
mother's
a risky thing to do.
my mother's social worker salary, in fact, is what helped start the early days, and I think it was their own support and investment in the beginning.
Wow.
And small batch runs, they were publishing maybe one book at a time and having to sell all of those. And eventually, once they got distribution and started getting retailers, then you start getting some economies of scale. And
Yeah. So I grew up in a small family business, and I was expected to work with child labor.
yeah, indeed, yeah, I can relate.
When I was about 10, stacking shelves in the store, we had a grocery store. And I was wondering if I mean, you did too, grow up in a family business.
Yes.
Were you expected to help out?
Yeah, I think totally fair. We were stickering erratum corrections into books when I was no more than 10 years old. Wow. We were the subject of photos for textbooks that were being made for the Department of Education, right? For K to 12. So I saw too many.
How glamorous is that?
Well, not really. I didn't necessarily want to see myself in textbooks, but lots of friends got to as well, and we needed children, and we needed children here. So it was really a great opportunity again for so many different people to benefit from the work that the company was doing insofar as creating books like that. But yeah, I wasn't expected so much, but it's inevitable when it's a family business. Sure. Like, everybody has to contribute. It's difficult work. It's not 9 to 5. It's day and night. It doesn't turn off. And it works when you do have people willing to put in that time and effort. So as a child, I inevitably participated in that. Mostly willingly, and then willingly for sure when I had chances to work in the retail shop that we did have downtown at one point, and eventually made my way through different departments over the years when I was in and out of university or in or out of other jobs, and yeah, it was just always there. It's a part of the
and now it's your
deal.
Company.
Yeah.
And since your tenure, I think you've taken on the catalogs of other publishing houses.
Yeah.
Just talk about what you've been able to do and accomplish since you have been the president and publisher.
I think when I was coming into, I would say, management level work at Breakwater, we were just coming off, some decades of really successful years with educational publishing. So Breakwater really turned into a hybrid house that was publishing both educational content and trade books. And we're relying very significantly on educational revenues. That's far richer if you're able to succeed in that market. But I saw, along with my peers and learned from my peers across the country, that those days were on their way out slowly but surely in the educational field, and that was important for us to reprioritize our trade publishing program and do a better job of it and establish better reach and distribution for it. So that's where you saw, I think in my tenure, our increase in the number of trade titles we publish in any given year, and expanding into different genres that are new to us in doing that, and really trying to achieve national and international success for those titles and other rights sales for those titles, like film rights, for example, or stage adaptation. So that's been a big focus for me in particular, is that extension into other potential revenue sources for the books and the authors that we publish, whether that be a film deal or a translation deal, trying to really bring that content to as many new audiences and opportunities for income that we can reach.
So, since you've been in charge, what are some of the genres that you've expanded into?
If anything, probably a revisiting of where we started. Is kind of going back to those short stories and that poetry and the drama that we weren't publishing a lot of because it's not financially profitable. But boy, do we ever get good recognition for having done it. I mean, if you look at examples in recent years, Maggie Burton's debut poetry collection won a national award for Canadian poetry. Paul David Power's play, Crippled, was a finalist for the Governor General Award, one of the top awards in this country for that kind of work.
Right.
So it's clearly being recognized and regarded by industry leaders outside of Breakwater that this is important content and we're doing a good job of it because the industry is telling us so. And I think that's valuable for establishing Newfoundland and Labrador as a significant contributor to Canadian literature and world literature for that matter. And then expanding it beyond our shores, you know, like film deals help us draw more attention to the book. So it really augments the existing effort of any given work. We might not have sold a lot of copies, but then a film deal allows us to revisit that, and it allows us to convince other countries to maybe take a chance on something. And so one success in one of these fields leverages the others. So I've been really interested in my time in trying to increase that as best we can for the reach of our authors and the work that we're publishing.
And something I don't think you had in the beginning, not in the early days, you didn't publish cookbooks.
That's
and
right.
I remember a few years ago, I did a cookbook, and I said to an author who happened to be on one of my shows, a distinguished author.
That's right.
Actually, it was Lisa Moore.
Oh, fabulous.
Anyway,
One of the best.
I was talking to Lisa, not on camera, but I said, you know, I did a book. And, I said, a cookbook. That's just a cookbook. And she said, well, look, she said, don't feel, you know, at all unconfident or about that, because she said in the publishing business, she said, it's cookbooks that keep us going.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, and that's the reality of the model that we had to adapt as someone trying to be a literary trade publisher. The reality is there's not enough money in that combined. And that's the model the world over. When I meet with publishers from all around the world at the Frankfurt Book Fair, and you're introducing your press and telling them what you do and why you do it, they all understand that model. They're doing the same thing. You have titles that are more commercially viable. That's your cookbooks. That's your children's picture books. And a nice balance of those with your literary titles makes it possible to publish all of those works somewhat successfully. And ensure that you're able to do the important works that aren't necessarily profitable. So it's finding the balance of how many more commercially performing titles they have that are also culturally relevant too. But nonfiction tends to be more profitable out the gate than fiction and poetry and short stories, depending on the subject matter. And so that's a model we too have established, and we have a certain number of titles in any of those genres that we consider our formula, if you would, for a year, which adjusts somewhat. But that's very common in the industry, is finding that balance of nonfiction, fiction, all the genres, in order to produce a year that can come out, but like there's a very varied performance per title, and it's known that others help carry those that need the help, which is fair.
So when somebody submits a manuscript to Breakwater Books, how many eyeballs see that manuscript, and are you the person who makes the final decision as to whether this gets published?
Yes, I am. In Breakwater's case, I am. But yeah, it varies across genre again. But for the most part, you know, we're screening submissions as they come in. Have you even followed our submission guidelines? Like, it's not coming into the slush pile, as they call it, unless we've seen you've at least followed the instructions on how to send it to us. And so that can involve a couple of editorial interns and other administrative staff coming in the door. And then it depends on genre. So a lot of in-house decision making is had about which ones make it to the next level, if you would, of that process. And there we'll seek often reviews from people within that genre or experts within that genre. So if you think of historical fiction, we have often had other successful historical fiction writers from our list assess a manuscript in that genre because they know it and they write it and they've researched it themselves. So they offer really good input that we might not have on staff. And then in other genres, we do have specific editors. So if you look at our drama line, for example, Robert Chafe is our drama editor. And so he evaluates any drama submission that we get and decides with the protocols that he established with us when he first took on this role, which which plays we're going to publish and why. So it's a combination. And it varies really across all of the genres that we publish, which is pretty much all of them at this stage. But yeah, at the end of the day, as publisher, I make the final call on all of those.
So, in terms of sales, I'm just wondering, you can order books online, you know, you can go to a bookstore. There's different ways of getting books, and obviously, you know, you can get them in an electronic form, digitally. What sells best, or how does that work?
In person, going into a bookstore and buying a book is still king.
Really?
It's still the leading acquisition of books, followed, I think, then by digital sales of print books, right? You know, when ebooks first started and everybody was worried about the impact they would have, we were worried about losing 40 to 50% market share of our print books. And I think still to this day, Breakwater is only averaging about 10% of our print sales have transitioned to ebook sales. That stat is higher for larger companies that are publishing more of the genre stuff like sci-fi and romance, where those numbers are really skewed in those genres for bigger firms. So you see a higher electronic uptake of those books. But yeah, for the most part, independent presses are really only about maybe 10%, I would say, in this country. And audiobooks as well, even smaller. There's a lot of really great work happening to convert a lot of Canadian books to audiobook, but there's still a lot more to be done. And though there's great increases in audiobook sales, it isn't necessarily for Canadian books like ours, which is the case for all books, because again, the same domination of the multinational published books in the print book marketplace also exists in the digital book and the audiobook marketplace as well. So these Canadian authored, Canadian published books are somewhat lost in our own marketplace, in our own country, and the economies of scale of the marketing budgets of these huge firms who we're up against versus ours makes it very difficult for our books in all of these genres to be discovered. More people want to buy and support local and Canadian authored books, and a lot of people are doing a great job at going out of their way to find them and do that. And more people want to do that. We've done surveys. The industry tells us that information is there, but discoverability is the issue. We're making them, but they're still not finding about all of them or hearing about all of them, which makes sense. The publicity venues for books are also dominated by the big popular books. So,
well, this has been a fabulous discussion, and I want to thank you for being on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
I wish you continued success, Rebecca.
Here's hoping. 52 years and counting, Carl.
Thank you.
Have me back in another 40.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I'll be here. That, folks, is it for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time.